Deputy Prime Minister and now confirmed Defence Minister Richard Marles. Richard, good to see you. Thanks for your time this morning. So let's start with China today. It has walked back its security deals with Pacific nations. Do you expect Beijing to come back for them again?
I think we can expect that China will maintain an interest in the Pacific. And really, the point here is that we need to be focusing on our own relationships in the Pacific, a point that we've been making for some time. We've got to put the effort in. We've got to make sure that we are relating to the Pacific in terms where we're thinking about their interests and how we advance their future. And that's obviously the focus of the Albanese Labor government. I mean, Penny Wong was sworn in on a Monday. She was in Fiji on Thursday. That says everything about the priority that she's placing, that the government is placing on our relationships with the Pacific. And unlike the former government, we're actually going to do the work. And I believe if we do the work, we will be the natural partner of choice for the countries of the Pacific.
Peter Dutton took a hard line against China. Will you do the same?
We saw a lot of chest beating on the part of the former government. They were pretty good at their rhetoric, but in terms of what they actually did, managing the hard power equation, they were a complete failure. And so we're going to be focused much more on the doing than the saying. What we saw under the former government was a gap of 20 years open up in terms of capability in relation to our submarines in just 10 years. It's one of the worst failures of defence procurement that we've seen in our nation's history under the former government. That obviously then becomes a major priority for us going forward now to make sure that we get submarines right. And that is fundamentally important. Yeah,
I will ask you about subs a little later. I just want to get you on this point though. If you need to be, will you take a hard line against China?
Well, of course, we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to have the courage to articulate Australia's national interest when that differs from Chinese action. And you've seen that from me, you've seen that from Labor throughout the last decade. But this is not an exercise of chest beating. It's actually an exercise of putting Australia in a position where we ensure our national security. And actually, the former government didn't do that. So people can talk about them taking a hard line. The fact of the matter is that in their actions, they did not. In their actions, they failed in relation to hard power. In their actions, they failed in terms of Australia's relationships in the Pacific. And that requires now a whole lot of repair.
When you said there in the first answer, though, that you expect China to maintain an interest in the region, is that undermining our national security?
Well, it shapes our strategic circumstances is the answer to that question. And our strategic circumstances are as complex as they have been since the end of the Second World War. And China is a key part of that. It's why we've got to get our national security right. It's why we've got to get our procurements right, get our capabilities right. It's why we've got to make our relationships put the proper focus on them. And we will do that. And that involves, obviously our alliance with the United States, which has never been more important. The Quad is critically important, which is why the Prime Minister was so keen to be there on literally the second day of his tenure. AUKUS is very important. But we've got to do the work in our region, and there was a complete failure to do that on the part of the former government.
Is China our biggest threat?
I think China has sought to shape the world around it under President Xi in a way that we have never seen before. And that presents enormous challenges for us.
So is that our biggest security threat?
Oh, well, I think it is certainly our biggest security anxiety, and it is why our strategic circumstances are so complex, and it's why we need to be getting these equations right, and we need to be making sure that we do the procurements right, do the relationships right. And it does mean, obviously, we in areas like the South China Sea, we do need to be asserting the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is freedom of navigation, because most of Australia's trade goes through that body of water. That's clearly a body of water which is central to our national interest, and it's very important that we articulate that where it differs from Chinese action, and it certainly does.
Okay, I'm racing through these questions because we've only got a short amount of time, but we've got the Frontbench that was announced last night. Richard, was Tanya Plibersek demoted?
No. The environment portfolio is a critical portfolio. We regard it as front and centre in terms of Labor's agenda. I mean, the former government may have relegated its importance, but environment and water has always been a major priority for Labor. It's an enduring passion of Tanya Plibersek, and I know that she's very excited about the opportunity of taking this portfolio.
But can you see why people are seeing that as a demotion, though? Because she had been on education as a shadow minister. She had been very effective. She's one of the Labor Party's most effective communicators, for that matter. And then all of a sudden she's not on it. People know that she's probably not the best friends with the new Prime Minister. Do you see that?
I don't, actually. I don't see any of that. Well, what I do see, I completely agree with the fact that Tanya Plibersek is one of our very best communicators. She is a fantastic performer. I completely agree with that. But people change roles. That happens in the establishments of new cabinets, particularly in the aftermath of elections. It happens whenever there is a reshuffle. This is a really critical role, and we need one of our very best performers in it, and that's why Tanya is there.
Just a final one here. I'm not sure even you can answer this in 30 seconds, Minister, but how are you going to address the capability gap between the Collins class and nuclear submarines?
Look, it's a really good question. I don't have the answers up front. I mean, there's a lot of work to do. I think that the most important point to say to you in 30 seconds is this is just about the number one priority for me coming into this portfolio.
Okay, and what are you going to do? And again, this can't be done in a short answer, but what are you going to do to reform defence to stop waste and the botching of projects?
Well, we're going to have consistent, thoughtful application of policy and behaviour. And that's not what we've had from the former government. You know, we're not going to politicise defence procurement. We're actually going to do it in the national interest. We're not going to call press conferences before elections for the purposes of winning votes, when actually there are really critical matters of national security at stake, and that's going to be our focus. I mean, a short answer to that is our focus is going to be on our national security and the Australian people. Our focus is not politics.
Okay, your predecessor, I know you're friends with Peter Dutton. Has he given you any advice in the defence portfolio?
He has sent me his best wishes, and I really do appreciate that. And obviously, it's been a big week for Peter, and I've sent him mine. You know, at a personal level, I'm actually very proud of him. At a professional level, the gloves are off.
Okay. Richard Marles, appreciate your time. Thank you. We were able to squeeze in a few questions there, so thank you. We'll talk to you soon.